Y'all like subcompacts? Great, cause I don't, but I went ahead and fired a bunch just for you. It's called emotional manipulation. What is up, guys? My name is John with PPTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things compendium of small handguns that go in your pants. When it comes to the ever-expanding world of subcompacts, you've got a lot of options, and we've covered most of the flagship tiny boy guns from the larger manufacturers in dedicated solo videos previously. However, outside of the usual suspects like Glock, Sig, and so on, there are a lot of peripheral manufacturers submitting their own subcompact designs to the increasingly crowded market. And while it doesn't necessarily make sense to give each one an individual video, we thought it would be prudent to do a big subcompact roundup featuring many of the models you guys have been asking for in adjacent video comment sections. This is going to be a bit brief and perhaps with less detail than a full individual review, but hopefully it'll come in handy as a reference point to help you narrow down just what you're looking for if you happen to be in the market for a gun you can point at your junk inside your waistband, you know, safely. Up first is Smith & Wesson's M&P Shield Plus, boasting a reasonably hefty 13-round magazine plus one in the chamber, a flat-face trigger for easy, repeatable shots, and an enhanced grip texture that helps with gun retention when it matters most. I've shot a few different M&P offerings over the years and have never been particularly impressed by them, but this is the first time I've gotten my hands on any of their concealment-oriented compact models, and I actually found myself pleasantly surprised here. The Shield Plus's overall grip shape feels fantastic, and although this is obviously a subjective personal thing related to how the gun interacts with my own hand geometry, I found that it points super naturally, even if the grip texture itself felt just kind of okay with the actual rivers of sweat my body was expelling in the sweltering Texan humidity. Using a thumbs high and forward approach, as I am generally wont to do on most handguns, puts just enough pressure on the slide lock lever to prevent it from engaging when empty the majority of the time. But that's just kind of the name of the game, and I'm not going to fault the Shield Plus for that. Trigger-wise, the Shield Plus's vaunted flat-facedness does indeed feel like it lends itself to reasonably accurate and repeatable shots. And though this brief period with the gun was my first exposure to it, I felt like I found that sweet spot for writing the trigger reset real quick. The Shield Plus's safety mechanism is a familiar-looking shoe that must be depressed within the trigger itself, and drawing from an appendix carry with our office favorites, Hidden Hybrid and Concealment Express holsters, felt pretty damn great. All in all, I'd say the Shield Plus is a damn solid choice, and 13-round mags in the world of subcompacts is nothing to sneeze at. I'm not quite sure how to relate this, as obviously everyone's built differently, but if you're looking for that mix of concealability and mag capacity, with a grip that facilitates that natural connection between your eyes and the irons, the M&P Shield Plus is probably worth a glance. Up next is the Max 9 from Ruger, a striker-fired subcompact that claims to feature a smooth trigger pull, clean break, positive reset with a quote-unquote medium textured frame that provides for a secure and comfortable grip. Operative words here being claims to because bruh, nah. I'm going to preface this again with the point that everyone's physiology is different, and maybe what works for you doesn't work for me, etc., but holy hell did I find the Max 9 really unpleasant to shoot. You've got the ability to rock either 10+1 or 12+1 magazines here, and utilizing the 10-rounders we had access to, I found that the gun's diminutive pistol grip just didn't really provide enough meat to get what felt like solid purchase over it, causing it to recoil in a bizarre up and forward motion. Again, a good amount of that could very well be on me, but I also have what I would describe as pretty average dude hands, kind of right in between a medium and large in most glove sizes, so similarly graspy gentlemen may want to pay heed. Depending on what your personal preference is when reloading, you might also find yourself as baffled as I was by the design of the slide lock lever. I think I get the idea behind relegating it to taking up as little real estate on a subcompact pistol as possible, especially after just mentioning that I wind up riding larger levers on other guns quite frequently. But to me, this feels like a major overcorrection in that it winds up making the Max 9 slide lock lever so small as to be useless. Unless I'm missing something obvious here, the entire lever component is that tiny, impossible to manipulate tab. And while it'll certainly lock the slide back without issue, I hope you're comfy slingshotting your gun when it's empty, as that's realistically the only way I could find to disengage that lever. A brief glance around online confirms that other users appear to experience all sorts of weirdness related to the slide release and it either failing to lock, or alternatively locking back with rounds still in the mag. But again, this is one of those design decisions that feels so strange as to make me second guess myself. Like, am I the one just not getting it here? Additionally, the Max 9's grip just doesn't suit my hand particularly well, and the entire grip angle feels sort of vaguely wrong in a way that's really hard to pin down. Ergonomics are very much subjective, and I'm trying my best to be impartial here, but those of you who are regular viewers have maybe picked up on the fact that I very rarely go out of my way to emphasize how much I dislike a certain thing, as I always try to do my best to search for a silver lining when I can. But you're making it real hard here, Ruger. The Max 9's trigger was just sort of okay, I guess? Truth be told, I don't really remember much about it while mentally trying to untangle how fucky everything else felt, which probably indicates that it's a standard polymer striker fire subcompact trigger. A little spongy, which comes with the territory, but overall serviceable if not impressive. Lastly, there's a distinctive crunchiness to the mag release button that downright felt gross. That honestly might be something that clears up over time as the gun gradually wears in, but I'm also not positive I've experienced an unpleasant, spongy creakiness like this outside of crusty old milsurp guns, so I don't really know what's going on here.
Is there a word for, like whatever you'd call the opposite of ASMR? Because that's how the mag release felt, but with your hands.
The iron sights are at least decent, with a fiber optic front sight that's real easy to pick up in bright daylight, but that's probably the only part of the gun that felt like it worked well enough to highlight. If you hadn't caught the drift by now, I really didn't enjoy a single thing about the Ruger Max 9, and outside of a relatively low MSRP of about $550 or so, I'm struggling to find any selling point here that'd make even that chunk of change worth throwing down. Maybe the Max 9 works for some folks, but I'm also of the opinion that you probably shouldn't be shopping the cheapest option when it comes to a potential carry gun. With whatever that was out of the way, we turn now to Springfield's Hellcat, which describes itself as the highest capacity micro-compact handgun in the world, with a standard magazine that sits flush in its grip holding 10+1, and an extended magazine that's slightly larger holding 13+1. You might notice that we open this video with a gun also featuring 13+1 mags. And it seems worth pointing out what, to me, feels like a bit of a marketing gimmick here, being that the Hellcat is about 6 inches long with a 3-inch barrel, and so is the M&P Shield Plus. Is there realistically a difference between what people refer to as subcompacts and microcompacts? I'd say no, but if you're an expert on such things, please scream at me below. Marketing hubris aside, the Hellcat features some pretty aggressive slide serrations up top, a big loaded chamber indicator just aft of the ejection port, a railed frame for lights or lamb units, and a reversible magazine release for those cursed with being born wrong-handed. First impressions here are that the Hellcat's sights are damn decent, and the high-vis tritium green front lines up quite nicely with the almost oversized tactical rack U-dot rear sight. The slide is also optics cut straight from the get-go, with Springfield themselves recommending a Hex Wasp, JP Enterprises J-Point, or Shield RMSC. The gun's minimal profile does create an overall quite snappy recoil impulse. Not anything really gnarlier than you'd expect from other subcompacts, as snappiness is just kind of what you get with pistols this small, but probably about on par with something like the stock Sig P365 if you've ever fired one. The Hellcat's grip texture, however, felt a bit subpar, and again, while shooting with disgustingly sweat-drenched hands, I couldn't help but feel like I wasn't getting a fantastic grip on the gun. I should probably mention that in general, I tend to run hotter than most folks and sweat in anything above 75-degree weather, so take that for what you will. But for fellow moist boys out there, be advised. Wow, I hate that phrase. Right up at the front of the frame, ahead of the takedown lever, is an inward impression with some grip texture as well. The intent obviously being that you've got a bit of a ledge to apply pressure to in order to help stabilize the gun, a la the accelerator cuts and ledges you see on Glocks quite often. In fact, I've dremeled a similar cut into my personal Glock 17 frame. And while I respect the attempt here, as most guns just leave your thumbs twiddling in the wind, I have to say that going with an inward dimple rather than an outward ledge doesn't feel to me like it works particularly well. Now again, just to play devil's advocate with myself, I realize that I'm dangerously close to bitching here because a feature is close to a thing I'm familiar with while still being new and scary and therefore bad. And also it makes sense to limit the amount of potential snag points on a gun you might need to get free from clothing at a moment's notice, but that being said, it still leaves a bit to be desired. Lastly, the Hellcat we had access to also appears to have a rather large and pronounced casting seam that makes its presence known by aggressively recoiling into your palms. This is probably the part where the comment section tells me to sandpaper my calluses into dainty mitts for daring to talk about the fact that a rigid, raised line of plastic repeatedly hammering the skin it's in contact with may, in fact, be uncomfortable when shooting for long periods of time. And I'll head them off here by pointing out that these are likely the same people who were upset about my pants. And fellas, I got plenty more upsetting clothing items where those came from. Try me, bitch. I have a complete list of just full stream of consciousness notes from the range that day that I was just hammering into my phone, trying to get all of my takeaways and record them so I could remember how it felt in the moment. And for posterity, I just wanted to read you what I had written for the Hellcat, exactly as I entered it into my phone. Quote, "Rear grip casting seam recoils blood pain into your meat hands, ow." End quote. Yep, real talk though, the Hellcat isn't necessarily a bad gun and it shot well enough overall, but subcompacts are already unpleasant enough to shoot on a good day. And in my humble opinion, if you're picking up a carry gun that you may potentially have to use in an emergency someday, you probably also want a gun that's comfortable enough to train with often. For me, that's not a Hellcat, but for you, maybe it is. Up next, we've got two different recent additions to Sig's 365 lineup that felt worth mentioning without doing complete spin-off videos of their own. First up, the 365X takes the original P365 slide and adds a different grip module, both lengthening the pistol grip and altering the trigger a bit to create a package that tweaks most of what I dislike about the OG 365. While that grip length isn't a massive difference in terms of the couple of inches tacked on, for me it makes all the difference. And that addition of a 12-round magazine that sits flush in the 365X's grip doesn't hurt either. Considering that one of my biggest gripes with the stock 365 is that the grip length is so short as to feel unwieldy, I appreciate this quite a bit, and you might too if you've come away from the stock 365 with the same impression. Our Sig 365X also came with a Romeo X pre-installed, losing the rear sight in order to do so, and the combination feels fantastic. Additionally, the X's trigger has been redesigned to feature a much flatter profile that breaks at 90 degrees, and is a noticeable improvement over the 365's sort of mushy trigger in terms of providing a cleaner feeling break. In an adjacent category sits the 365XL, running the same extended X profile grip module as the 365X, but with a similarly elongated slide providing the L as well. See what they did there? Personally, I feel like the combination really shines, as the extra 0.6 inches of X-axis length feels like it's just enough to bump this sub or micro compact up from something that feels like a really angry squirt gun to, yeah, this is a gun. Perhaps it's psychosomatic, or just closer to what I'm more familiar with, but the slightly longer sight radius, slide, and grip all come together to create a package that points incredibly well. And I think I wound up preferring the 365XL to the X, despite the fact that the latter came equipped with a red dot, and I've been nothing if not spoiled by shooting handguns with optics lately. More or less everything on the 365XL is going to be the same as on the X, but for those of you out there who don't need the most concealable profile gun possible, or those left feeling potentially dissatisfied by some of those smaller options, do yourself a favor and see if the 365XL rectifies any of those issues. So, where's all of that leave us? Like I've hinted at a few times here, I'm not an enormous fan of sub or micro compacts, whatever you want to call them, as they generally suck to shoot with across the board. However, that's just kind of the nature of the territory you get into when concealment becomes your primary concern, and there's not much you can really do to get around that. In my mind then, it makes sense to pick the option that fits your needs the best, and no one is really going to be able to tell you what those might be except you. But given that you should probably be proficient with the tool you're carrying, should you ever need to use it, you probably want to snag a gun that you can train and actually become proficient with minimal growing pain. For me, that's very solidly going to be either the M&P Shield Plus or the Sig P365 XL, for the reasons I've enumerated above. But if at all possible, I'd still recommend getting rounds through multiple sub, micro, nano compact models to truly determine what works for you. Alright guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, send our videos to your friends. Your friends really like it when you send them our videos. Your friendship is contingent upon the fact that you send them our videos. You can buy some shirts for your friends. My name is John with Pew Pew Tactical. We'll see you next time.